I think the first thing that comes to my mind is to see Dr. Rubin get so excited and to know that he's actually a teacher. You know, to think, I went to Northwestern, to think that I would have a teacher, let alone a pediatric teacher, that could get fired up like that. And so there's something unique about this place. There's something unique about Life University in Atlanta, Georgia. And there's ultimately some pretty cool stuff going on. I just heard there's over 160 prospective chiropractic students on campus. So let me just give you an example. That's actually more than some of the entire chiropractic colleges have student enrolled. So I want to urge you to know that it's because of you and it's because of all of us as collectively, I think we heard that all weekend, that we've got to keep pushing this needle. So for me, I come from a big family. I come from a medical background, probably like a lot of you. In fact, I've got my two oldest brothers are medical doctors. My mom's a nurse over 30 years. My sister's an occupational therapist. So I grew up nothing to do with chiropractic. And so I tell this story about one time when I had gone home. I was actually a chiropractor, but I had gone home where I grew up, and my sister's, it was my nephew, my sister's little boy, had an event at church. And so me and my two older brothers who are medical doctors walk into the bathroom, and we're doing our thing in the urinal, and we get done, and they both leave. They get done before me. They wash their hands. They leave, and I got done, and I actually walked out of the bathroom without washing my hands. And they looked at me, and my brother Mike said, "Dude, why don't you wash your hands?" And then I looked at him and didn't say anything. And then my other brother Tom said, "Yeah, didn't you know? Like we learned in medical school that you could spread germs and disease and infection if you don't wash your hands. We learned that day one medical school." I said, "Well, day one chiropractic school, we learned not to pee on our hands." And so I think there's a point to the story, which is we're doctors of cause. And you've seen this weekend, and I would just, and I may get a little bit of passion here for one reason, and you've seen some passion. You've seen Dr. Billy and Dr. Coach, and I think the passion comes from, and I have an opportunity to teach students and doctors, the passion that you see actually comes, I think, as a patient. That passion is the same passion to defend me as a patient. So if you don't get passionate in your office, I would argue, do you see the big picture? Do you see the power of what we do? And it starts with the philosophy. We know that. But I want to point some things. So my brothers being MDs, I felt like I've always had maybe this burden of proof, that I always felt like I had to prove what I do. And I've been on, especially the last 2 years, been on a mission to say, you know what? I will prove what we do. And a lot of you even ask, do you have the research and all these things? Well, I'm going to tell you, even from, you see chiropractic, you see it starts with a philosophy, it's a science and an art. However, I think the language of today actually is more of a science language. So I was doing some reading. This was an article, and I want you to follow me. I'm going to read a tiny bit of it. This is an article written in 2009 by a guy named Rupert. And here's what he said. He said, in 1963, when I was studying biochemistry at Cambridge, I was invited to a series of private meetings with Francis Crick and Sidney Brenner in Brenner's rooms in King's College. So Francis Crick was Watson and Crick, the guy that introduced and developed our understanding of DNA. They had just cracked the genetic code. Both were ardent materialists. He said they explained there were two major unsolved problems in biology. It was development and consciousness. He said they had not solved the problem, in their opinion, because the people who worked on them were not biologically very bright. So Crick and Brenner were going to find the answers within 10 years or maybe 20. Brenner would take development and Crick would take consciousness. They were inviting us to join them. So basically, this is 1963 saying, listen, we're looking for some students. We're going to dive into this thing, understand biology and conscious development. So here it gets better. Both tried their best. Brenner was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2002 for his work in the development of the nematode worm. And Crick corrected the manuscript on his final paper on the brain the day before he died in 2004. So pretty big, heady guys. At his funeral, at Crick's funeral, his son Michael said that what made him tick was not the desire to be famous, not wealthy or popular, but to knock the final nail into the coffin of vitalism. So these are some big-named, strong-minded, powerful people saying, we haven't done one thing, and that is prove that vitalism is hocus pocus, that we can explain everything based on science. So here's what he said. He failed. So did Brenner. The problems of development and consciousness remain unsolved. Many details have been discovered. Dozens of genomes have been sequenced. Brain scans have been ever more precise. But there's still no proof that life and minds can be explained by physics and chemistry alone. Think about that. That's what we stand for. So I go and I speak to students and doctors, and they say, do you have the research and the validation to prove it? And I'm going to say, yes, we can. I'm going to actually get to your heart today, a little bit through your head. But I want you to first know the power that's in your hands. See, Thomas Edison said, the doctor, you heard it, the doctor of the future will do what? Yes. Now watch. I believe it would have to do with something like this. Regeneration of brain tissue. Stop and reverse postural and bone degeneration. Address pain 5 times. It's not about pain, but you know what? Journal of Spine 2005 show that 5 times better. You are 5 times better than the best medicine has to offer. And Celebrex and Vioxx alone, 2 drugs alone, make more than the entire chiropractic profession. 2 drugs. 2 drugs. Every school, every doctor, every office, 2 drugs. Yet, we have the truth and the proof. Improve immunity better, but I said better than $1,000 check. Did you know that Magic Johnson and Suzanne Summers both get injections every other week for $1,000? It's a combination of interleukin and glutathione. Did you know that a chiropractic adjustment is way more powerful than that? And they're spending, see the value of what we do. See, I believe that it does have to do with proving it, and we can prove it, right? Best anti-aging solutions ever. If you know the cutting edge research and data and conversation is all about how can we stop these things called, at the end of the DNA, called telomeres. How can we stop it from shortening? Because we know that's aging. So there's salons and wraps and every spa all talking about anti-aging. But did you know who's the best at it? You. We are. Right? But does the world know? Epigenetic expression, the methylation of DNA, changing our genetic expression. Do you know who's the best at that? Right? So you say, well, do we have any proof? And I created this. Actually, I didn't create it. I just actually took it from a bunch of my mentors. And I was actually doing a talk. This was in July of 2012, I believe. And I was doing a talk here at Life University to some students, and I'm like, you know what? I know there's always an argument. There's always like, you know, they won't even look at philosophy, as I was talking with Dr. John about last night. They won't even look at philosophy unless because it sometimes gets you know, shown to them as unscientific, and now you're kind of the unscientific weird guy. So I went at it and said, you know what, I'm going to show you are actually the most scientific. And I don't want to bore you with that, but when you look at that, it's like, that's what happens? Really? That's what happens. The power of an adjustment, that's what happens. So in my house, we talk a lot about this with my 2 little girls. And some people, well, how did you get that? Where did you know, where did that come from? And so one day I had walked into the office, and this is, kidding you not, that's what I saw. So we talk about that often. That's my 3-year-old, and she helped me with that. So I will say, do we talk about neurology? Yeah, a little bit. Here's how we talk about it. We will not watch, read, talk about anything that has to do with Dr. McStuffins. You know what Dr. McStuffins? So my daughter had a dance recital, and there was, you know, thank goodness it wasn't her team, but she had a dance recital, and the dancers, one of the whole dances was about Dr. McStuffins. If you don't know, it's this doctor that, you know, the bag. So they're ingraining it. And somebody say, well, that's kind of, you know, you don't let her do that. I watched her at a museum one time, like go and like knew what she was doing with, like, was going to put this thing around her neck. And I got after her, and I'm like, and so we say, well, that's kind of rude. Shouldn't you let her explore? You know what? To me, to let the world show her where true health comes from, right? That's kind of a side note, but I would you know, invite you to know that the world will suck them in, and it's our job to stop it. So I wanted to actually, as I talked about this, you know, my history, and they talked about. So I didn't know anything about chiropractic, except that it helped me with back pain. It helped me be a better athlete when I would go to college and play sports. So I thought chiropractic had to do with back pain. When I got to chiropractic college, someone taught me the big idea early on, thankfully for some mentors, but I quickly became kind of an outcast in my school. Not kind of, I became an outcast in my school. And even in my own family, so I taught this to my sister. I said, you know, the reason Dad probably had a heart attack was because he's got subluxation. And then she told my older brothers, and then it was like, oh man, like he's gone over, like Dan has gone off the deep end. But then it actually, as a kind of, my instinct is like, but I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to you. And so then I went out and I got in practice, and in the circles that I ran with, like 1,000 a week was like, if you hit 1,000 a week, you were there. Well, I did it in about 4 years. I did it, and there was a void. There was still like this thing of like, but my whole entire community hasn't changed yet. And so that's when I kind of went on this journey to say, you know what, I really, truly do believe that when we can start to get a little more of that understanding, we're going to get there. Things like this. So brain degeneration, reversed and prevented with chiropractic. So Stuart Lippman is a PhD, and he came out and he showed that when, in 1994, that when you actually have a lower amount of ATP, you don't get actually glutamate out of the brain, and you set yourself up for brain decay or degeneration. Look at the amount of Alzheimer's, dementia. And so did you know that one adjustment, they did a study in 2011, one adjustment showed that you increase ATP, and what does that mean? We regenerate brain tissue. So think about if Hitler would have got adjusted, right? Think if the school shooters would have got adjusted. Right? I've just been listening recently. Did you know? Somebody said when you get adjusted, your emotional state is different. It absolutely is different. There's certain neurons in your midline, your spine, and your midline that affect the cerebellum and your brain emotionally that no other part of your body does. So if you're subluxated, it is directly impacting your emotion. Right? So this is a big deal. January, the spine, many of you have seen that, the impact on the immunity. But it gets better. I think the future of chiropractic has to do nothing with symptoms, but more with how do we actually start to take a person and show that we improve human potential. So there's a study, anti-aging. I can get you all this stuff and show it, telomere length, and the best, the single best way to shorten a telomere, which means you're going to age faster, the single best way is to increase these things called catecholamines, which is the #1 thing that happens when you're subluxated. The best way to shorten, that means the best way to age yourself early is to not get adjusted. So I was thinking, actually this came this morning, I went for a little run, and I'm like, you know what, okay, so a lot of us got an iPhone, and the new iPhone's coming out in September. I'm not a techie, but I'm ready for the new iPhone. My mind broke, and I'm like, let's just wait for the new one. And I thought about it. I'm like, okay, so if you guys in this room, you had the next 10 generations of the new iPhones. Right now, you had it in your pocket like you, so you would like take that to the world of like, this is so valuable. I could sell this thing. Like if I wanted just to tell that, like everybody's going to want to see this. Do you know what you have in the power of chiropractic principle and the application of adjusting, and the data behind what we do is 100,000-fold better than any iPhone you could ever get and or know about, or new version. I just don't think that we I know we don't fully get it. And I'm gonna continue to fight it. Genetic expression proved by chiropractor Richard Francis, a neurobiologist, showed that when you methylate DNA at a certain part, you actually change the genetic expression. When that happens, and it's actually cumulative. So as the subluxation continues to progress, you change the expression and the offspring. We literally change generations to come. This is something to get excited about. And some of this is like, you're going to ask me, like, well, can I have the study? It isn't just about one study. It's about actually fully understanding. It's not hard, but it is. And so there's guys in this room, Dr. Mike Hall, Dr. John Minardi, like guys that are a lot smarter than me that are doing it. And it's just figuring out, how do we get this to the world? So a scientific man does not aim at immediate result. He does not expect his advanced ideas will be readily taken up. His work is like that of the planner. His duty is to lay the foundation for those who are to come and point the way. This is what I believe Life University. This is what I know Dr. Guy Reed. I was sitting in my philosophy course last weekend, this diplomate program I'm taking, and Dr. Russell says, yeah, actually Dr. Guy Reedman started this course. I'm like, man, here's a guy that's been around the block, and he's still doing it, and doing it harder and better than ever. Thought of questions that you and I have not even, won't even think about for years, and he's already thought about them. And putting them in play at Life University. This is why. Do you know that so even though we kind of take the brunt, do you know that we're the second largest healthcare profession in the world? Sometimes right? That's the second largest. Even when, see, and I know and I feel that, but it's like we're still so valid and bigger than we think. But we want to be the biggest. Why? Because we're the most truthful. Because it's the truth, right? So, and Life University is the largest school of the second largest profession in the world. There's over 5,000 healing arts, and we're the second biggest, right? But what's number one? You know what number one is. And you know what number one is, you know why we get a little upset at this, is because I feel like when you know the reality, like Helen Keller said, what's worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. What's worse than being unprincipled and unscientific is understanding the science and the principle, but not have a vision to see what it actually means when the world adopts it. See, when you have a vision like that, you try to fill big, large stadiums, and then you sit at front rows at seminars where you could be off flying around the world like Billy DeMoss. You sit in the front row to say, listen, I get that this thing is probably bigger than anybody will ever understand, so I'm going to have to go and do it. So what are we trying to combat? So children's chronic disease doubled from 98 to 2002. 88, sorry. 16 years. The number of chronic disease doubled. Journal of American Medical Association. So from 1998, or 88, sorry, to 2004, but watch what happened. In 2004 to 2010, what happened? It doubled again. American Academy of Pediatrics, the amount of chronic disease in kids in what took 16 years, took 6 years to double again, 26 to 54%. Where are we headed? Right? And we know this, and I'm not here, it's not doom and gloom, but I think it's reality. 70% of Americans on drugs, Mayo Clinic 2014, 25 million pills taken every hour in our country. Almanac of Chronic Disease. British Medical Journal 1991, only 50% of medical procedures are studied and validated and proven to be safe or effective. And then to me, I talk about this with patients, I talk about this with doctors and students and staff. Journal of their own journal, July 1st, 2000 says the data remains imprecise. The benefits the United States current healthcare system currently delivers may not outweigh the harm it imparts. That's their own data. So I get passionate about it, but it's not even my stuff. It's theirs. So we're fighting on behalf of the people that I feel can't protect themselves. That's the moms, the dads, the babies that come into our offices, and they come through us. So the question is, we know 93% arguably is nonverbal. Why don't we say we got to have certainty around what we do. However, there comes a time when silence is betrayal. I was talking to a guy last week, a chiropractor. He said, you know, I know this, even if I know this truth, I'm fearful. And I said, it's not that I'm not either, but I said, I think the truth should outweigh. There's a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. So I believe that once we own it, that fear of them not getting it overcomes the fear of them rejecting us. That's my belief. So some of you have seen this before. This has to do with history in the making. So my last slide here, last two slides. Captain James Lancaster shows that lemon juice, this is 1601, look at this, shows that lemon juice eliminates scurvy. Dr. James Lind proves it again. 1795, 194 years later, they finally adopt a citron juice supplement to stop scurvy. What's the point? It's chiropractic principle number 6. All processes take time. Look at that. So 16 BC, there was bone setters. 1867 was the first kind of recorded. 1895, we know what happened that year. And I believe that it's up to us. And I believe we're on track. And I believe there's nobody better than Life University. So the truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it, let it loose. I always say this. The principle does not need to be dressed up. You don't have to put lipstick on it. Just tell the truth, and it'll set you free. Thank you.